Somebody unlikely to receive that medal anytime soon is Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, whose threat to oust House Speaker Mike Johnson is set to unfold this week. And while it appears his speakership is safe for now, thanks to Democrats, analysis from the Unite America Institute points to how this is an example of what the group calls the primary problem. Greene and the two GOP allies supporting her bid to oust Johnson, Congressman Paul Gosar and Thomas Massie, won their last elections in districts that lean heavily towards Republican candidates. In the primary, they were nominated with only about 15% of eligible voters in their districts combined. Collectively, the three districts represent less than 1% of the voting population of the United States. And look at all the chaos that has followed. And the executive director of Unite America, Nick Troiano, joins us now in the studio. He is the author of the book titled The Primary Solution, Rescuing Our Democracy from the Fringes. Nick, very quickly spell out the primary problem. Why do we get into this position?
Well, what we're seeing right now is a good example of why Congress has a 15% approval rating. Because the American people desire and deserve public servants who are willing to work with each other and solve problems. But what they get are partisan extremists, if not conspiracy theorists, who are chasing fame, money, and power. We focus a lot on who they are, but we think it's important to focus on how do they get elected. And they get elected mostly in low turnout party primaries where the incentive is to play to the base voters and those special interests that influence those voters rather than represent a true majority. And so it's no wonder we're left with the division and dysfunction that we see.
I was thinking about that during the primary campaign for President Trump recently, when it occurred to me that basically President Trump was being nominated and a whole load of people were disenfranchised from that nominating process because in many states the primary process is closed. Is that part of the problem as well?
Exactly. In 15 states, independent voters are actually prohibited from voting.
Basically, if you're an independent, you don't get a say.
Which is unconscionable in our democracy. Who are those independents?
Doesn't sound massively democratic.
No, I mean, nearly half of veterans are independents. A majority of young people are. So how do we tell those who fought for the country and are the future of the country that they don't get to have a say in our democracy? It's wrong. And the good news is there's ways to fix this that doesn't require changing the Constitution or an act of Congress. States can actually amend these state laws to give all voters the right to vote for any candidate in every election.
So who's doing what to make this better?
Well, what's really exciting is this year we're seeing a half dozen states pursue ballot initiatives that would open party primaries to all voters and give those voters the right to vote for any candidate. That includes states like Idaho, where just this week volunteers turned in nearly 100,000 signatures to qualify this initiative for the ballot. Voters will get to render a decision this November.
OK, Jen, I'm keeping a kind of running checklist of the way that the structures of American democracy don't actually reflect the will of American voters, or at least the will of the American public. It's getting, I have to say, I'm getting on to page 3 or 4 at the moment. But this seems to me like we've just, this is just another one.
Yeah. It is. I mean, there are, but it is actually ultimately voters that are, voters that are electing state legislators that are allowing gerrymandering to continue. That's part of this problem too. So, can you speak to to that as well in that question of gerrymandering?
Well, it's true that gerrymandering plays a role in the fact that 83% of congressional districts are not decided in the general election. They're decided months earlier in the primaries. So far this year, nearly a third of Congress has already been elected because those elections in the primaries have happened and the general election's a foregone conclusion. But we can eliminate partisan gerrymandering and still be left with the majority of this problem because most districts are so uncompetitive, not because of the way the district lines are drawn, but because of the way that voters have self-sorted geographically, which is why we will not be able to really address this problem until we reform our system of party primaries.
OK, problem and solution. Nick's book is titled The Primary Solution, Rescuing Our Democracy from the Fringes. Executive Director of Unite America, Nick Troiano, thanks so much for coming into the studio and keeping me company here. Still